This is the strategy inside everything. I'm Adam Pierno. All right, welcome back to another episode of the strategy inside everything. We're doing something different, which is something you should get used to. I'm going to be experimenting with the format and trying to break it, making this as interesting for myself, which I think will be more interesting for all of you. For example, today I'll be talking to Tom Goodwin, who is head of future and insight at Publicis Group, where he plays a role understanding technology and what that will mean for people going forward. In fact, what we're talking about today is how he's interpreting that in a new book called ReThink that he's baked up. Really, we take apart the concept behind the book, and hopefully I helped him shape it, but mostly he's just explaining what he's already thought out. I really want to thank Tom for his time and joining me and talking through it, being pretty patient with my questions, and being open to kind of tearing the book down and putting it back together as he was thinking through it with me. I think you're going to enjoy this, and let's get to it. Well, so I've been reading your book, ReThink.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've been reading ReThink, and I have questions for you. And
it's made you think.
It has made me think.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I know about you, Tom, is you're an optimist in general.
Absolutely.
So tell me, all right, this is a two-part question that relates to the book that is not stated specifically.
Okay.
On the continuum of time, as you understand history in the past and where you see us going and some of the directions you plot out in the book, they're not predictions really, they're more directions.
Yeah.
Where do you plot us today? Like, where is humanity, or where is urban society, or the person at the center of this book? Where are they today?
Do you know what? That is the question that gets to the very heart of what this book is about.
That's what I do, Tom. I ask questions that get to the heart of books.
Nailed it. We can just finish in like 2 minutes' time. You were absolutely right that I'm incredibly optimistic, and it's the kind of delta between how I feel like life should be and how it actually is, which is what inspired me to write this book. Because I felt, in the words of a kind of now disgraced comedian, everything is amazing, but nobody is happy. And I think there is this sense somehow that the promise of technology and the possibility of technology are somehow not quite matched by our everyday expectations. So the internet should just make us unbelievably enlightened. The internet should make us feel incredibly connected, incredibly together. We should have this incredible sense of belonging. Life should be amazing because we have everything we need. We have more than enough food. We have enough information. We've never known such abundance. But instead, there's this really odd feeling, I think, in the world right now. And I think it's come about because no one's made sense of this technology. We don't know how to behave. We don't know what etiquette to use. I think as a species, we're designed to evolve quite slowly and to do things face to face. And all of this technology has created this big kind of rupture in society. And I think that's what we feel. So on that kind of continuum, I think life will only ever get better. And I think we're going to see a kind of a reversion back to the norm where what we should be feeling and what we experience should be more closely aligned with what technology makes possible. And I think that will be a remarkable time. And I think we're probably sort of 5 or 10 years away from that sort of fairly slow snap back to the path that we should be on.
What's the part of it that either as individuals living in the world or as providers of these solutions, what's the gap that's keeping us from that happiness, from appreciating it or understanding what, you assert, I'm pulling a quote here, people don't know how to live, how to communicate, and what matters from the book. I'm wondering, like, where's the gap there? Where are we? Why can't we do that?
The gap has come about because, without wanting to kind of quote Steve Jobs unnecessarily, I think we're living other people's lives. So, ReThink is the idea that comes about from the fact that so much of our life is led on autopilot. So the presumptions that we have around us in all directions are entirely fixed by constraints of the past. Every single thing. So, everything from our zip codes being defined, to our careers being defined, to our educational establishments, to government, everything really around us that we orchestrate ourselves around is one, fixed, two, fixed based on things from the past, three, fixed based on technologies and societies' limitations from the past. And slowly, when you begin to question those things and challenge those things, you realize that all of those things that we use to shape our lives are complete nonsense. So this idea that we need a system of government which allows people to have a voice is entirely based on the idea that we don't have a voice, so we don't have telephones, so we don't have the internet, and we can't just tweet our way. Something like education is based on the assumption that books are incredibly expensive and that the only possible way it's going to work is by having people gather in a physical space and all read the books together from someone that's more intelligent. Our careers are based on the assumption that we have to earn as much money as we can, as quickly as we can, and then our bodies will get worn out because by definition, work for all of humankind has been physical work. And then at some point, we're going to get so old that we get retired from the factory and then we shouldn't have to work anymore and we should be paid money back from a system. And all these things just aren't true anymore.
Right. Yeah. I think it would be harmful for me to retire if I'm a if I'm a thought worker. You know, it's actually more damaging for me to let my brain atrophy.
And it's damaging. It's just dumb. I mean, like, you know, you're only going to get more clever every single year, Adam, and you're only going to get more valuable, and you're only going to get more context on the past, and you're only going to become more calm. And I think somehow we think that people that have seen it all before will by definition be negative, but I don't think they will. And this idea that just at this point in your life where you're the best person you've ever been and the most helpful you've ever been, that's the day that we decide that you should go and play golf in Florida. It's completely bananas.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you have to go to an office every day and you have to be signed on for full-time work. But this idea that somehow we can't find a way to tap into your knowledge at that point is extraordinary.
It doesn't have to be binary.
Absolutely. So much of the world is based on entirely binary things. And I'm not the person to talk about things like gender, blurred lines, but virtually everything around us is now weird. So when do we start working? When do we stop working? Are we working right now? Is this your job or is this fun? Like,
right.
You take the microphone away, does this become less work-like because we're just doing it for ourselves? Where is the place of work? Like none of these things that we used to have that would create these very tight containers for life, like none of them have these lines. So, value is kind of removed from how long we spend working. Outputs are somewhat unlimited. The global nature of work means that you're more likely to get something done by shopping in a mall in Beijing than by looking at a book in your office. And I think we just need a bit more kind of radical thinking in a way.
And a lot of what you've described, and even as you just closed, comes back to this idea of spontaneity.
Yes.
Which maybe is just the way I consumed it, but you seem to tuck spontaneity way at the back.
Yeah.
But it seems to be pretty central to the thesis of the book. And I wonder, I'm married with children. I own a home in a suburb, of a medium-sized city.
Yeah.
And I miss spontaneity. Spontaneity was fantastic. I remember it fondly. I lived in New York and we could go where we wanted. But now that's not something that's realistic. And I wonder if the lens that you pull spontaneity through and some of the examples you use, how important is that to the understanding our place and our potential future?
Yeah.
It's a good lever to pull for me to understand what you mean, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do some of the things that you're describing just because I'm now encumbered by some other responsibilities and things that prevent me from that.
Sure. I mean, I am always aware in any of my writing that I am both naive and provocative, but always well-intentioned. So when I do have conversations with people about this, most of the time people say things like, Tom, you have no idea. It's an extremely irritating question, but I couldn't possibly do this for that reason. And you have no idea why. And you will never know unless you've got kids or that you own a car like this or whatever. And those people are kind of absolutely probably nearly always right. But that doesn't mean that
yeah, but I don't mean it to like challenge you and say, how dare you?
No. But I just mean that doesn't mean that question wasn't a helpful question. Just because I ended up looking like I was wrong doesn't mean that I'm not glad that I asked it.
Yeah.
And much of this stuff, and again, this is a kind of big part of the book, is that things are difficult if you're the one person that's acting this way. So if you're the one person that doesn't really think that streets in New York should be labeled streets going east to west, and actually, avenues and streets should swap places. If you're the one person that thinks that, then life's going to be really hard for you. But if you can persuade everyone else to behave the same way, then actually things might get better. And I think spontaneity is one of those things where I do genuinely believe that all forms of planning come from things like tickets having to arrive in the mail, and they come from things like venues having to sell out venues way ahead of time. And they come from this need that everyone's lives are somewhat routine and repetitive. And of course, there are, far, far more jobs in the world that do have a factory, and they do have people clocking in and clocking out, and these things are predictable. But increasingly, whether it's kind of thought-based jobs, or whether it's demand-based jobs, or whether it's more informal things like the gig economy, we do just realize that things like algorithms do a very good job of allowing people to monetize empty space and monetize excess capacity. And actually, right now, if I was to go in an Uber, kind of ironically, to the airport, I would find that probably a flight, the next flight to Heathrow is probably the same price, or maybe even cheaper than it was a couple of weeks ago. I'd realized that to get into a hotel using Hotel Tonight would probably be cheaper than booking it way in advance. Everything from theatre tickets that would suddenly open up, to restaurants that have spare capacity, to friends that I can just tweet and say, hey, are you in town after all? And if everyone starts behaving like that, then all of our lives become really exciting.
Yeah, there's definitely more opportunity, and that's the key point that you're making, is that technology is making that possible.
Yeah.
Even the ability to that people can visualize or have a visualization of the way the costs of flights are patterned, and I can look, and if I book it on a Tuesday, it's cheaper than booking it on a Monday.
Yeah.
And that same idea.
Yeah.
Do you see everything through the lens of spontaneity? Because when I think of your thinking about education and work, a lot of that is what you said, we're living other people's lives.
Yeah.
And we're living 3 generations ago, and the factory has shaped the way I come to an office for some reason. But it couldn't, if I wake up at 3 a.m. and I have an idea for my job, shouldn't I be able to sit down and execute it and send it off?
I mean, I think that's absolutely the spirit of this piece. Is it's saying that there is this huge delta between what is possible and how we're actually living. There is an incredible sense of stress, I think, that is happening in the world right now, and lots of pressure that people face. And I think everyone puts down that pressure to faster changing times, or they put that pressure down to less job security than ever before, or they talk about how different it is to work with different generations in the office. Like there are lots of explanations for this anxiety and stress and difficulty, and I think they're all fair and true. I also think a lot of the stress comes from the fact that we are in this interim period where, like, some people are able to work remotely and some people are not. Some people kind of feel like if they were to have an amazing idea at 3 o'clock in the morning and then write it down and then say that they can't come in that day because they're exhausted, there is an assumption that would be bad behavior. So we're kind of in this hybrid period where we're kind of living in the shadow of the rigidity and the assumptions of the past, but we're trying to behave in a way which is more future focused.
You just raised a question for me. You're a manager of people. You have a team of people that report to you?
I have I mean, in what appears to be a kind of ludicrous example of my odd life, through my normal publicist job, I don't have any formal help whatsoever. There are people who will help me, but because I can persuade them, which is a whole other book probably. Then I had this kind of cloud of everything from a full-time intern in London who I recruited because he's remarkable but had quite an interesting background, to about, in any given year, I'll probably work with about 20 to 35 people from all over the world. And it might be anything from an incredible researcher from Manila who might help me find people in companies, all the way through to a virtual assistant, all the way through to a man who is Australian but lives in Shanghai. And I just occasionally say to him, make me clever about Chinese commerce. Here's $1,000, give me stuff that's reasonable for that. Slovakian logo designers, Serbian website designers. I'm spreading my money everywhere.
So you're making the whole economy, the global economy, is Tom's playground. I like it.
Yeah, I have 25 different income streams. Again, I say this not to be boastful, but just to explain how weird it is. We assume you have a job. That's how you make money. The idea that your job might take you to Europe for 3 weeks, and then you decide to Airbnb your apartment while you're away, and then all of a sudden that's an income stream. That's not how we're used to thinking. The notion that you might record a training course once on Skillshare, and you might get, on average, nearly $1,000 a month just from a training program that's out there. These are all things that are not supposed to happen, and we're not set up to think like this at all. Not at least things like the taxation system. Where do I pay tax? If I write a presentation on a plane going to Dubai that I deliver in Singapore from a Filipino company that wants me to talk about trends in the world while I live in America, where should I pay tax on that? Is that illegal to work on the plane in those instances? No one has any idea whatsoever.
Don't ask that. I'm going to cut this because that question...
Just interrupt me on the flight and be like, Tom, you're not allowed to work. Is the plane is above a certain altitude? Does it become okay? No one has any idea.
I think every country is going to be knocking on your door that you just mentioned. We want our 7%.
That's true.
You're going to owe on that work you did on the plane. Where do you, so you put, well, the reason I asked about managing people, let me start there, is it sounds clear, since some of those people are non-salaried employees and are more task or contract, you allow for this flexibility though from your salaried employees that you work with. Hey, if you get the idea to work on this at 3 a.m., as long as you hit my deadline, I don't really care when it happens, if you're at home or at a bar working.
I think absolutely correct. That's precisely how I feel. And I'm aware, again, that by being someone that works that way, that doesn't make these people's lives easy. You would imagine that would be the most wonderful thing you could ever hear, is someone empowering you to work this way. But again, the reality is they then need to fit into other systems and work with other people, etc. But I personally am a ridiculous believer in trusting people until they prove repeatedly that you can't trust them. 2, empowering people to just do things the best possible way. 3, asking people to come to me with solutions whenever they ask for a problem. But by far my biggest thing is I just say, I would like you to accomplish this. I really don't care how you do it. I really don't care where you do it. I absolutely don't care when you do it. Just get it done brilliantly. And I'm here to help. And if anything's in your way that I can deal with in particular, then that's my role as a manager, is to kind of clear your path for you. And within that, the people should then realize that actually often the best way to do that is to come to the office. And often the best time to come to the office is between 10 and 4 on a Wednesday. But I'm not telling them they need to do that. It's just that you should be aware that, if you want to speak to a team of 7 people, all of whom are writing code for you, then probably the best way to do that is in person. And that's when they're all there.
You said a word that I had written in my notes to see if I could get you to say, and you said it. I feel like it's a victory.
I'm trying to think what that would have been.
And the word is trust. The word is trust. Okay. So
it's everything, isn't it?
Yeah. So for this future that ReThink is all about this setting forth a vision of how things could work and how things could what's funny about the book is not that you're not making these predictions of what will happen. There's very little new IP that you've invented for your theories. It's more like, this is how these pieces will snap together if we want to live this kind of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you said the word trust, and how important. So I understand for managing people and for the freedom from work rigidity, right? Mm-hmm. Trust. Tell me about trust as an underlying theme.
That's a very good question, actually. I think for so long, trust has come from the fact that we all knew each other. I mean, so if we really do think about this in the kind of human history, for most of our time alive, we would have had reputations that came from the fact that you'd have gone to the local pub or you'd have paid the tradesman over years. I think then the kind of global nature of the world and early computers meant that we became quite globalized as a society. And then we needed to find other signifiers of trust. So trust, if you were an employee, came from being employed for a long time. You know, you could trust someone if they'd worked at IBM for 15 years because clearly they were good. Trust would come from other things. And sorry if this gets a bit close to the bone, but it comes from educational institutions, you know, to know that someone has got a certificate to show that they've studied at a certain place carry great meaning.
Yeah, that's what those credentials are for.
Yeah, exactly. So these kind of brands have been extremely important to us. And I think, again, none of this stuff's going to happen crazy fast. None of it's going to happen with a huge tipping point necessarily. But I think we might just get used to the fact that, again, if we really accept that this is a new paradigm where work happens in a different way, then actually our reputation is carried by what we've done before. Our curriculum vitae or resumes become kind of websites where we show off things that we've accomplished before. Our reputation is really carried by recommendations or followers and all sorts of fairly obnoxious new currencies of the digital age. And also, if we are working in a way where we're spontaneous and where our value is quite easy to see, then actually the notion of employing someone doesn't need to be this huge leap of faith. The idea of buying something from someone without a storefront doesn't need to be a huge leap of faith. And I think we might get to a kind of new form of trust, which is just based on reputation and sort of digital currencies like that.
But isn't reputation? So there's another area where we talk about social construct that are based in the past, and you talk about the family construct and why a woman needed to be married to a man and what it meant for a man to be married to a woman and have a stable family life. Those, along with things like your college degree and the brand from which you earned it, those build that trust. Have built, I should say, that trust going back to the 1800s.
Yes.
To the second wave of higher ed.
Yeah.
What will make trust? What will be the shorthand for reputation and trust going forward? Then, please tell me it's not my reviews on Fiverr.
I mean, that is a scary thought. I think. I mean, you made me realize something that I hope doesn't come across from the book, which is I'm not saying, look at all these nuclear families, look at all these married couples, look at these people having kids, look at these people with jobs, like what losers they are.
No, I didn't take it that way.
Stuck to kind of the traditions of the past. I think I'm just saying that if you assume that everyone can now question every assumption, and if you empower people to live a life which is most suitable to their own personal circumstance, then that suddenly means that perhaps we don't need to enter this spiral of assumptions that people make. So what tends to happen is that people get, good degrees. I mean, again, I've been kind of awful in my presumption that people who listen to this podcast are people who are kind of quote unquote a bit like us. But many listeners will have degrees, and that means that quite a lot of debt, or that your parents had to save up a lot of money, and that means you need to get a great job to sort of show that the investment was worth it, and that means that you probably need to live in quite a big city, and that means that you probably want to buy a house at some point to feel like you feel significant, and then you probably want it to have a garden if you're going to have kids, and you need to have as many bedrooms as you have kids. And then it's going to be extremely expensive. And then you have to get a promotion to make sure that you can keep paying mortgage repayments. And you have to start saving up for for education for your kids. And then before you know, you've entered this incredibly stressed world where you're in a marriage that you can't possibly lead, you're in a house that you can't possibly sell, you're in a career that you can't possibly change, and you've got lovely lawns and lots of bedrooms. But if you would, and again, this is sort of cheeky and radical and naive and hopefully not unhelpful, but if you imagine that none of those assumptions are there, if you just imagine that you were plonked down as a kind of 27-year-old with no degree, but with a good brain, and with no debt, but owning nothing, but with the skills that one might expect someone to have, you could just start living in a cheaper country and just do some kind of remote consulting. You could write a book and just live off the income. You could, do some arbitrage on rental properties, and you could find yourself in a situation where you don't really earn that much, but where you don't really spend that much, and where all of the social constructs that we put in place already are not necessarily that limiting.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a different way. I guess it implies in the world of ReThink, in the 10-year to 15-year future, that we will have it together enough to reconsider those things. But I don't know.
These were the promises. I mean, we were promised that we would all have so much time off that we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves. Like, there were books written in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And, the idea of the 4-hour work week, like the whole idea of technology was not that we were going to create all of this money, then inflate house prices, then inflate asset prices, then inflate house prices again. And then we'd all be crippled by debt that we have to service. And then we all had to work extremely hard and do side hustles to keep alive. Like, the idea was that we were all going to chill out a little bit and play golf and bake bread and grow our own carrots and stuff. And I think when you talk about that stuff now, it's presumed to be some kind of reaction against the rat race. And I don't mean it like that. I mean, I work really, really hard, but I choose to do so out of my own desires and my own curiosities rather than any sense of obligation. And that's why it feels good to me, because the kind of pressure on me to maintain my income is not really there.
But that's the thrust of it, is that we all have to. So there's some people I wouldn't say they're at the top of this, but the people that are generating the increased pressure on finances, the people that are making loans and trying to make real estate more expensive and more lucrative for them. Yeah. Kind of breaking the whole system for everybody. Yeah. For the future, for me to have spontaneity in the way that it's outlined here, and I think, which sounds beautiful, and the idea of the 4-hour work week that's made possible by technology, is really only possible if I count on the other structures to say, oh, okay, wait, that's the world we all want. We all want this. Yes. Like, everybody, we want to slow down, but that's one of the questions I have is, Can that be counted on?
It's an extremely good question, and it makes me realize how provocative this thinking is. And I would never go so far as to say I'm some kind of wild radical and I'm taking on the system, and there is a system and these people are complicit in creating a destructive narrative that means blinded. I'm not.
I see you leading a political rally right now.
I'm writing a placard as we speak. I'm going to start burning my pants or whatever the suffragettes would be. It's more that, here's the deal. So, like, there are so many assumptions we made in life, and I don't think we've challenged any of them ever. And I think it would be wonderful to go through a process where we start challenging those assumptions. And then we might realize, actually, do you know what? If we can do anything on the planet, we'd still like to be an accountant that lives in Baton Rouge. Like, it might be, we can do absolutely anything crazy, yeah, but I still want to buy a nice house in Baton Rouge, and I want to kind of go skiing in Colorado in the winter, and that's fine. I would like to think that the process of doing this empowers you to then I don't know, take your kids out of school for 1 year and travel around the world and give them the most amazing education possible by traveling around the world. Maybe you can, take a year out when you're 18 and try setting up a drop shipping company or try and develop an app or something. Maybe while doing your quite sort of normal and quite traditional accountancy job, maybe you can occasionally just take a weekend off and, drive a few hours away into the hills where you have a cabin that's actually a tiny home that actually is off the grid, because solar power means that any home can now be off the grid, and that the way that water treatment works these days, you can actually not have to be plumbed into a system.
Yeah.
And then this is a home that was actually remarkably cheap. Maybe this is a home that you rent out on Airbnb, and maybe you have a local cleaner, and maybe you end up generating extra money, even though you've bought something that allows you to be more relaxed. So this is not a binary thing where you're either running around sort of eating vegan granola and talking about global climate change and living off away from a normal life. It's more about finding your own place on that journey.
Yeah. And we're seeing more and more, 5-10 years ago, some of those examples you gave would have been seen as fringe.
Yes.
But now every day you come to work or you meet someone and you hear a story, either them directly now more often, or others that are in your immediate circle. Absolutely. I just heard a story about a high school student who has earned $1 million playing video games. Mm-hmm. And like that person's life and the life of their family, that's not a traditional job.
No.
That person did not set out to say, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to become an expert. They were just like, oh, I'll enter this contest. And next thing you know, they were winning contests. And that person's set for life. Their family trajectory is set. They can make any decisions they want.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, that was not an option. There was no Twitch-led revolution of gaming, of esports that would give people those opportunities.
Yeah.
So that people could make that choice and now do these things.
I think it's incredible, and this is where I'm so glad that you noticed my optimism at the start, because I am a genuinely optimistic person, and I just think I don't know how amazing would it be if you're a golf instructor and you can just orchestrate your diary in a better way, because there's some kind of app a bit like Uber for golf instructors, not where you're kind of put in a Daihatsu and driven to someone, but where your calendar is just managed. And then you can just decide to work 3 days, do lots and lots of lessons, and then take a few days off and, chill out. Or you can be a chef that has a side gig who, just does private dinner parties. Or you can be a maths teacher that does extra maths tutoring, and you have kind of surge rates just before exams, and everyone's kind of okay with that. And then you make lots of money from people who are happy to spend that money. It just seems like there's so much more value to be created, so much time that can be released, so much greater leverage of the knowledge that people have. And many of these new systems to do that have not been used for that yet. So Uber's mainly based on making everyone the same and suppressing them. What happens if there are platforms about expressing people's differences and trying to make sure that they got paid by being very unique and very different and very expert, and they should get paid extremely well as a result. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that the vision for those platforms of giving people freedom are beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of what you theorize in the book is beautiful.
Yes.
It's this idea that, hey, all the pieces, all the plumbing exists. Yeah. We just don't all agree that we can do it. The people that are doing it today are the first people to move it forward.
Yes, absolutely. That's precisely it. That it is precisely that inflection point where, and a huge part of the book is this idea from McLuhan that first we shape our tools and then they shape us. And that is to say, we've now had Airbnb, and the way that we've treated it so far is, how can I rent out an 8-bedroom house in Bed-Stuy, turn it into a 37-person hostel?
We're trying to milk everything in the old model.
Yeah, exactly. Buy the cheapest IKEA furniture I have, spin it around unbelievably quickly, hope that the police don't notice and get away with it. And actually, that's really not so the intentions of Airbnb were never to do that. Our kind of first creation of the new behaviors with this technology has been to be slightly money-centric. And I'd like to think that over time, we will understand the meaning of this technology. So we'll realize the meaning of Airbnb is that I can share this apartment with you, Adam, when you come here, and we can figure out a way to make sure that you use this excess capacity. I'd like to think the meaning of Airbnb will be that nurses who are married to mechanics will suddenly realize there is just about a way for them to be able to buy a little cabin in the woods and it not cost them as much money as they thought. So that's precisely what I mean. It's a kind of new evaluation based on the realization of the potential of technology, and not working around either what we've done most recently with it, but also what we've done in the past as sort of human behavior.
The tools all exist, the infrastructure all exists.
Yeah.
Do you think people are ready to, I don't know, do the tools need to evolve further to push the behavior over the line and change the financial motivators at the very, very center of what holds it back? Or where's
I think so, because you delightfully put it earlier where you talked about how this stuff is becoming slightly more normal. I can't remember your sort of delicious phrasing, but this idea that someone that you know or someone that you know knows has earned $1 million through Twitch, that's a good example of how this comes about. So it's not that you decide to give up everything. It's not that everyone we know decides to give up everything. It's not that I immediately moved to rural France. It's just that you notice that more and more of your friends have a, what's it called, Patreon channel, or that more and more of your friends use that week that they took off to set up a website where they now do commercial writing for companies. It's that people who were influencers actually have been around long enough, and maybe they've saved some of their money, and now they're using that as investments in other types of companies. I think we'll see a gradual kind of creep in all directions. I mean, even something quite as worrying as the coronavirus right now, that this could do amazing things for a culture around working from home.
Yeah.
This could, the commutes are incredibly expensive, massively environmentally destructive, generally quite pointless, and incredibly stressful. Like, the most stressed people on the planet are normally 40 to 50-year-olds, often the men actually, who basically are just working their nuts off to try and maintain a lifestyle they thought they wanted. And to know that those people can work from home 2 days a week would be completely game-changing.
Yeah, that's the commute, the driving in and the getting home are definitely the points that I'm like, it's not that I want to get home, but look, that part of getting there is not fun.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good example of your question about, is the technology here yet? Because I think we thought it was going to be the self-driving car that would allow that. And actually, we now realize it's culture. Like, actually, we now realize the reason why people aren't working from home is because of the trust word that we talked about before. Lots and lots of company cultures and structures mirror each other, because no one really wants to be the first company to say, this is our new working from home policy. It's radically different. So I really believe that we have everything. I really believe it's a big deal. I really think this isn't about everyone going wild and crazy and free-spirited, but it is just about people living a life which is precisely the way they should have lived, rather than based on other things.
Well, go ahead.
And one of the key moments that kind of led to me thinking, yes, this book is right, is when, for the first time ever, I decided to get a financial advisor. And he was an absolutely fantastic person, like incredibly funny, knew everything about finance. And he just wasn't able to understand me at all, because he'd say things like, what's your number? And I would say, what do you mean? And he's like, the number that you earn that you can retire at. And I was like, I don't really want to retire. So that kind of threw him off the start.
He didn't know. He had no idea what to do from there. He's like, well, everything is built on that premise. So
yeah. And then he was like, well, what about the day when you just decide to do a lot less work? And I was like, well, I might decide to do a lot less work in about 3 months' time, and then just take off 2 years, and then I'll come back to this. And that clearly blew his mind again. Then he said things like, what are your regular outgoings? And I was like, I don't really have any regular outgoings. Like, sometimes I go bananas and I just decide to, give $5,000 to someone in Europe to do some research for me, just because I think it might be quite interesting. And sometimes I don't spend any money at all, because I just don't do anything for a bit. And all of these things just kind of, I think he thought he was having a mental breakdown, to be honest, because I was so weird. But it was that kind of process that made me realize quite how structured and uniform so many people's lives have been. And by having a generation of people who are a little bit like me, who are kind of gradually getting older and more indicative of the future, like, many of these systems are going to have to change. So.
Was that meeting with the financial planner the genesis for the book, or was that already while you were writing?
I think like all of my books, what tends to happen is I have one or two little ideas, and then they start taking root to the point where I think that maybe there are two or three quite different ideas that probably can't be joined. It's a bit like sort of trees growing. And then suddenly I realized that there were other saplings further away, that the trees were all growing and a canopy was forming. And moments like that, it was more validation that there's something here, more than it gave me an entirely new thing to think about. I mean, the process of writing a book is kind of painful, but also wonderful. So you can just be, I was doing a virtual reality experience the other day in a sort of exhibit in Brooklyn. And they showed, I think it's called Blue Marble. It's the first ever picture of the world taken from space that was really beautiful.
Oh, yeah. That is a beautiful picture.
I mean, it's a side note, but imagine not knowing what the world looked like. I mean, it's nuts to think that there were just people who didn't know that that's the context in which we lived. You know, you can understand. Yeah.
You know what's nuts is, I mean, how old is that picture?
I think like 1970 or something. So it's not,
not that long ago. We had no picture of the world. Do you know how fortunate we are to have that photo?
Crazy. We should probably just have that like on all our banknotes, and then like every day we should just be like, wow, like this is it. Like this is what matters.
It really is amazing to think that the day before that, there had been like 5 people that had seen what the world looked like from outside of it.
So what they did with that photograph is they took it and then they flipped it. And the reason why they flipped it around is because everyone knows that that's what the world looks like. And I was like, it took me about 10 minutes. And I was like, what? So we have a preconceived idea of what the world looks like. And I started looking into it, and I was like, obviously the world looks like it does because north is at the top, and north is based on sort of magnetism, and like north should be the top, I guess. But there isn't really any reason why it should be at the top. Like, there's nothing about north that means up. Like the south could be north. And then I thought, isn't it weird that, maybe it's just growing up in England, having the English educational system, but it's always weird that England is at the center of the earth. Of all maps, when actually, if most of the world's population have got nothing to do with GMT anymore. And then you think it's kind of weird that we all have like time zones rather than just all living in one time zone and actually changing our work hours around different times of day. So it should really be the case that there's just one universal time, and people in America just go to work at 2:00 in the afternoon or something. And it just made me, that was another one of these moments where I was just like, wait a minute, like everything about our world, like our maps are based on where the power used to be, like up is just based on nothing. And it makes you realize how much of our worldview is both fixed, but arbitrarily so.
Yeah. And how much of the future depends on reframing that future vision to what we know today. You couldn't just say, if you presented Uber or Airbnb, to your earlier examples, in the 70s at the time of that picture, and didn't give them any more context.
Yes.
People would be like, no, that doesn't make sense for how we live. We had to be boiled. The water around us had to be heated up enough for people's brains to say, oh, okay, I get this. I understand how this would work because I've used Priceline.com for 15 years.
Yes.
And now I understand I can rent, instead of a hotel room with my phone, I can rent a single room.
Absolutely.
But if we had shown them the picture upside down and just introduced Airbnb, the internet would probably be defunct. Nobody would be using it.
Totally. And that's why I should have done more of it, but I should have written more about how, what kind of tensions and opportunities are there in the world right now to be the boiling of that water. So I talk a lot about the artificial constraints, and actually, if I'd had my time again, I'd have written more about the opportunities and the underlying themes of the world. Because, and again, I am aware that this comes scarily close to flame bait or trolling, but something like man-made climate change becomes a challenge that we can design solutions for. So, there are things like resource depletion, which is such that it means that it's inherent upon all of us to just use less. And movements like Beyond Burger and meatlessness, obviously very helpful in that regard. But if we assume that sea levels will rise and that climate will change, then it means that we have interesting things like how do we move people from the kind of drainage basins of the Brahmaputra and Pakistan and Dhaka. How do we move those people to Canada? Like, what does it look like to create new environments in Canada? What do homes that live on, floating homes look like? And I don't mean in a sort of dramatic Waterworld way. So suddenly you realize that, rather than it being this desperate fight for survival, it becomes a really interesting architectural challenge.
Right. Yeah, it just has to be framed that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think I expect a royalty for the next book I just planted the seed for. So
it's one of your new side hustles.
There you go. Tom Goodwin with Adam Pierno. Yeah. I'll write the forward. Perfect. Tom, thank you very much for making time. This is fantastic. And I think people are really going to enjoy reading this.
I think so too. I think it's hitting the stores in like 2022 because I have to write the thing first.
How long? What's the process like for you?
I don't know. It's hard to write a book. The main thing that I think when I write a book is I want to be extremely respectful of the reader's time, because I start to read a lot of business books and then I stop reading them very quickly because I feel like they're a bit like albums used to be, where there are 3 good singles and there's lots of padded out tracks.
Lots of filler, yeah.
And the filler always got good if you listen to music enough, but books aren't like that.
The content for this book, I'm presuming, has been shared in presentations with clients and at presentations. What kind of response do you get from people inside brands?
I haven't done that with this one. So my last book was very unusual in that basically it was written almost in a diamond structure where I'd have thoughts, I'd tweet them out. When things looked interesting and it got people engaged, I'd then write an article. Then after writing lots of articles, someone said, hey, you should really write a book. So I gathered some of those good articles, not many of them. And I kind of thought, how do I create a book out of this? So it wasn't a compendium of essays by any means, but it was somewhat informed by the writing. And then obviously you do the promotion by writing articles about the book, and then you do tweets about those articles. So it's like a diamond. This one's weird in that I am still at the early stages of writing this book. So I appreciate the podcast to talk about it as if it already existed. And I'm trying to make sure that I've got enough in it. And quite a lot of my tweets at the moment, people won't notice, but they are exploring things in the book. So I will think things like, what kind of assumptions are there in how we live our life? Like, I think it's personally quite strange that people like lobster. This isn't directly helpful for anything, but I don't think the lobster tastes particularly good. I think if there's another world where if lobster was completely abundant and was not so hard to get at, people would just eat lobster and be like, I wish we could have some tuna. Like, that's really exciting.
Right. It's the same as a diamond.
Yeah.
It's the forced supply and demand thing.
Yeah. No, exactly. So I think, so I like just thinking things like, what is like lobster. So I haven't done the tweet yet, but there'll be a series of tweets where I kind of use to say what kind of assumptions are there about how we live our lives are silly, or what kind of technologies you think are actually underrated. Something like an LED is actually extremely boring, but has really radical implications.
I don't think we've scratched the surface of what the LED is going to change about
absolutely
culture.
I mean, you'd be an absolute moron to ride around New York on an e-scooter now. But if we'd never known cars, and in fact, people had designed life around e-scooters, and every single building had a big e-scooter lobby, or that e-scooters had docking stations, you'd realize that pretty much e-scooters would just be the best way to ever get around the city. And then very occasionally, you'd be like, oh, we need to find an e-scooter that fits 4 people. I guess that looks a bit like a Tesla. Very occasionally you think, oh, we need an e-scooter that carries heavy material on it. That's like a electronic truck.
Right.
But it's exercises like this which I like doing to, again, they seem quite cheeky and they seem quite destructive and they seem a bit sort of dreamy, but they do make me realize that, why do people think it's really ugly if there are 3 scooters parked on a street and they've fallen over? But it's fine if there are 17 massive tank-like cars that are parked.
It's just like the map, but we've just gotten used to which way is north.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for making time and talking through this book, Tom. I appreciate it. I hope I was constructive as you're working on your outline for it.
You were incredibly constructive, and I really enjoyed it and really appreciate this conversation.
Awesome. Hey, I will send you this. I'm not going to edit this very much, but I will send you a transcript of it.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah.
Because then you can hopefully copy paste stuff out of it as you're thinking of your outline.
Yeah, no, this was, I don't even know what I wanted this to be or what I thought it would be, but it's definitely more and better than both of those things I ever could have imagined. So
awesome. I'm going to put that on my book.
I can help out. So either now or in the future or next time you're in the city, like, give me a shout. And everything.
Yeah, I would love to get together for a pint or a coffee or something.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. That'd be really, really good.
Awesome. Hold on. I'm going to stop recording.
Okay.
Wait, don't stop listening. The show's not over. If you liked what you just heard, or you've liked any of the episodes of The Strategy Inside Everything, do me a favor. I really appreciate it. Leave a review wherever you listen to the show, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever. Please leave us a rating and a review. Please, if you can, share this episode or another episode with a friend. Let them know what you liked about it. That helps us quite a bit. If you have ideas for guests, for topics, follow up on episodes you've heard, you can tweet at us at @apierno, that's me, or at strategy_inside, that's the show. Either way, I promise I will respond to you and get back to you right away. And listen, running this show is a labor of love. I really do it just because I enjoy the conversations, but it does cost money. So web hosting costs money, microphones cost money, my kids' haircuts cost money. If you wouldn't mind, look at our Patreon. It's Patreon, Adam Pierno there, and you could help us out quite a bit. For more information about all the guests we've had, anything you want to know about the podcast, my 2 books, Underthink It and Specific, or ways to engage with me as a strategy consultant or as a speaker at your next event, please go to adampierno.com and you'll find all the information you want. And if you can't, just send me a note. Thanks a lot.